Are you an HR department of one, trying to figure out how to balance task and strategy while keeping up with changes in regulatory compliance? Do you need a fresh outlook on old topics? Then stop what you're doing, grab your coffee, and get ready to recharge. If you have people, you have problems to solve and things to do. Your host is Brenda, a 20-year human resource professional, ready to explore the HR industry with veterans of business and life with fresh eyes and new ideas. Learn about the rapidly evolving changes in employment law around the country, as well as new tactics to deploy and build engagement in your workforce. If you're looking to implement new practices to make your job easier in HR, then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Best Practices in Human Resources podcast. My name is Brenda Neckbottom, and if you are a first-time listener, I am so excited to welcome you to the show. Thank you so very much for joining in. And if you are a returning listener, thank you, oh my gosh, for continuing to stay on this journey. It's absolutely fantastic and very, very fortunate. All right, gang. So today I've got a fun guest. Like none of my guests are ever fun, but this guy is really fun, and he's a fellow podcaster too, which makes it really nice. So he probably sounds better than I do. I'm sure he's got better equipment than I do. Anyway, I'm gonna call out his first name, but I'm gonna have him explain the whole thing after this. So I'd like to welcome Chris to the show. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Brenda. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. Well, welcome.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. And like you were saying, my name's Chris. I was born Christopher Lewis Cockerell, and that sounds like I'm going somewhere else with this, but no, I got a Hungarian background. My mother was Hungarian, and she calls me Kristof. And Kristof is a lot more unique than Chris. There's an infinite amount of Chris's, it turns out. So when I went with my podcast name, I went with my first and middle name and then my first name that my mom and that whole side of the family calls me. So thus the Kristof Lewis podcast was born. And I think it's always so cool to talk to other podcasters. It's really fun. So thank you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. So you are my first podcaster on the show. You do well on this show. You're on my first
on
one.
This
on
show.
The other,
yeah.
On the other show that I had, we invited our first guest, and that was none other than David Rutherford from Team Never Quit podcast. And
Very cool.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. He was our first, although he had just left the show. It was a lot of fun having him on. But it's awesome to have you on.
Yeah, and it's so awesome to be here. I'm very excited to talk. We've talked obviously a few times offline, and I've really enjoyed what you're doing here.
Oh, well, thank you. I think what you're doing is pretty awesome too. So we won't have this like coded conversation, so people know what it is that you do. So Chris is a Navy veteran, and as you guys have probably read on the title of the episode, we're really going to be talking about if you're a business that wants to focus in on hiring a veteran, or you're faced with hiring a veteran and you want to, kind of bone up on some things. That's really what we're talking about here today, because the veterans are pretty fantastic folks. They've anteed up in life, but they also and some anteed up more than others, that's for sure. But bringing a veteran on board into your organization, it's not that, they're so drastically different that, you treat them like they have a third head or something like that. But there are some special things that come with the veteran. And so we're going to kind of talk about that. But before I do, I would love for you to tell everybody about your podcast, what it is, and how you got started, because it's a cool story. And I want them to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to talk about that. Thanks for bringing that up. So like Brenda was saying, I was in the Navy for 9 years. I served predominantly in naval special warfare. I was an electronics technician by rate. So my job was to do fun, techie, nerdy things. And I got to do that in a very special community that's near and dear to my heart now. That was very challenging. And I got to do a lot of work in stressful environments, to say the least. And so as I progressed through my 9-year career, I grew more and more and more as a person because of these experiences, these very unique experiences that I had. And towards the end of my career, about 7 years in, I started really getting into more of a leadership position, and I was really, really struggling with not being able to save everyone. And I don't know how that comes off. I know you can't like save everyone, but I would have so many like sidebars with people that I was that were working with me that I was leading, and I was just wanted to save everybody. And I heard a lot of people complaining, not only in my division and my work center, but just in the command that I was working at before I left. And I always give the example, like I would pass somebody in the hall and say, "Hey, how are you?" And I would genuinely like want to stop and be like, "Hey, how are you?" Because I don't want to waste our times, and I just want to legitimately know, how are you? And people would just give me the most mundane, monotonous answers and just not be happy with where they were. Another Navy day, another, whatever, another beautiful day in paradise. And so all these little disturbances in my life, I really took to heart. And it was very important for me to articulate to the people that I worked with and that I was trying to lead that, hey, I know you signed a contract here and you have to fulfill that contract, but that contract does end. So I started about 5 months or so before I got out. I got out a year ago this month, and 5 months before I got out in March of 2018, I started the podcast in hopes to encourage people to pursue different careers if they so choose to. So I was never encouraging people to leave the military. Like if it was right for you, then so be it. But I went out there and my first interview was with a stock trader that was very not proud of his former life and wanted to make a better life for him. So it was a great example for me to like have the inaugural conversation, as I call them, to be like, this is a guy who didn't like his background. He was putting his life and his family's life at risk. And now he turned it around and he's a stock trader now and he's bartending on the side. So I said, regardless of if you are in the military or you're a civilian and you want to change your career, when your military career or your military contract ends, you have the ability to go out there. So I just recorded number 90. So guest number 90, I'm at podcast 123 or 4. And I have all these examples of like, there's definitely a few repeats of guests, like type of guests, but nobody has been repeated, and they're all like from crazy different backgrounds all over the spectrum. You can absolutely wrap your head around. A lot of them are military, a lot of them aren't. And I just want to encourage career transition and to just, I always explain it as like showing people real life examples, like breathing examples, human beings that have gone out there and that have just not succumbed to a monotonous life and not succumbed to, well, I guess this is my life, like that have gone out there and have made something for themselves. And so that was like my goal of like giving examples, because sometimes if you don't know that you can live a better life, maybe you don't. So I really wanted to teach other people. And then selfishly, I was so hungry to learn from these people myself. So all these podcasts are just definitely for me as well. And I'm just so excited that I can capture those and share it with the world. And that's kind of how it started. There's probably a couple other things that I could think of if we got there, but that's it in a nutshell.
Isn't it awesome how when you've got a thirst for knowledge with other people, what you get out of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've always found it to be just absolutely fascinating. I mean, the conversations that you have with other people, and if you just stay quiet for a few minutes, it's amazing what you learn.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that. And I've learned so many things after being a host for that many people, 90 people. And one of the main things I learned was to listen to people. And I had a very tough time with it. Not that I wasn't a good listener, but I had a hard time listening to thought after thought, sentence after sentence, and being able to remember that and then regurgitate that and articulate myself well after that. So it's taught me to listen and then be able to answer those questions even better and answer their thoughts even better. It's been such a learning process. It's insane. It's bigger than I ever could have imagined. Like more than reading any other books, and I love reading, I really do, but more than most things I've ever done in my life, podcasting and meeting people like yourself has been insane.
Aw, thanks you. I can imagine that coming out of the environment that you've been in, and I'm not talking about the command, but the deployments. That one thing that I see with the veterans that I work with, and I work significantly with the veterans that are in your community, specifically in Naval Special Warfare, that the challenges that exist as a result of TBI, traumatic brain injury, I remember I was talking to, he was a lieutenant commander. No, excuse me, he was a commander, so he was an '07. And he was, we were chatting about some things that he wanted to pursue in life. And out of nowhere, he just started physically shaking. And I looked at him,
Mhm.
and he just looked at me and he smiled. He goes, "It's just the mileage, dear. It's just the mileage." And I'm like, I asked him, I said, "How many times have you been blown up?" And he says, "I have the second highest number of recorded TBI marks on my brain than anybody else in this
Ooh.
community."
Ooh,
Yeah. So he
that's not
got
a
blown
number I
up
want
quite a
to
bit. Yeah, exactly. And he's an awesome guy. I love talking to him. He's so much fun to be around. But it's interesting because he has a very good grip on
Mhm.
his situation, and he recognizes it when it starts to surface. So
Mhm.
in how he speaks to people, how he is in the world, he's very quick to pick up on the changes that are taking place with him that he may not necessarily have control
Sure.
over,
Sure.
and redeploy. I mean,
Mhm.
he re-engages the world, and
Mhm.
if just like that day when he just started shaking, and I looked at him and I was just like, "Oh my God, what's going on with him?" And he just said it. He's like, "Yep." He's like, "It's all good." He said, "Don't worry about it. I got this under control." I'm like, "Okay." And I talk to him every now and again. So, it makes that particular community even more special to see the after effects, and it's not as glorious and glamorous as a lot of people seem to think it is. So, and that's a pretty
Well,
good example
yeah,
why.
no, you're absolutely right, and that's a very, very humbling example at that. But I
Yeah.
think there's so much, obviously, with the explosion of social media and soft movies and NSW movies. It seems very glamorous, and that's the way, obviously, they're going to portray it for mediums of that character. But yeah, I think one thing or a couple of things that I got from that example is that you can have these bad after effects. Quite that's a nice way to put it, but you can have these bad things that are going to happen in your life, and then you said that he was able to recognize them, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that speaks just
Quickly.
for so many things in our lives that we can have these just things that come up in our life that haunt us, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
we meet them head on and we know that how we're going to act when it comes on and afterwards and all of these things that come with whatever that trauma is or whatever we're dealing with, and I think that's really important to, like I said, meet it head on and then understand how you're going to react from that and be able to control it better. So maybe it's going to happen regardless of what you do initially,
Yeah.
but be able to just deal with it a lot better and be able to control it. And if he was able to do that in front of you, like start shaking, like that's crazy. You might be think like, are you okay? Do I need to take you to a hospital? What's going on? But for him to relatively nonchalantly say like, hey, it's okay. I got a handle on this. I think that speaks a lot for him.
Yep. It does. He's a neat guy. So that's pretty amazing. But that's kind of, I mean, what now? His situation clearly is the extreme. It's the
Mm-hmm.
exception. It's not the rule.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not much different than a lot of other veterans that are out there. I mean, granted, with the mass amount of TBI that he has, which is really going
Yes.
to impact him later in life. I mean, it impacts him now, and he's in
Mm-hmm.
his early
Mm-hmm.
50s. It's really going to impact him much later in life. It's, his memory already has challenges, and
Yeah,
um,
that's scary. Yeah, I struggle with
yeah, it
stuff.
does.
I haven't been
He
like
can
blown up, but
yeah,
gosh, I have my own stuff. I get it. It's scary.
yeah. But I mean, even still, the military is learning that even with practices and the concussive rounds that take place, just even from being on the firing range and the shooting range for hours on end,
Mm-hmm.
those things do impact you after a while. But every veteran experiences something to where it's going to impact them in the long haul, and the more resources that the government is putting towards the studying of veteran well-being while they're in the military, and getting a baseline, and really focusing in on the long-term effects of a military career. It's good that although we're behind the curve as a country on it, the people are still they're starting to now get some unique benefits. I mean,
Sure.
even though there's
Yeah.
a lot of work to be done at the VA, but
Yeah.
the VA is
Yeah.
starting to open their
It's
eyes more.
it's gotten a lot better, and I can say from personal experience, and I've told you guys. So if you caught, I've been out for 1 year, and when I'm a planner. I don't leave anything to chance if I can. And even before I got out of the Navy, I had all my VA paperwork submitted. I got out of the Navy, it was all lost. So there is it did still happen, but then the VA got a new system. They have another company doing it or a third party doing it. Somebody else is doing it. And when they realized that it was lost, when this new party or whoever came in and did it, I'm telling you, they just knocked it out left and right. Boom, boom, boom. Set up everything for me. Like even paid the miles on my, for my gas to my appointments and everything. And they really took care of it. And it was just done in like a couple months as opposed to the year that it had been lost and I couldn't get a hold of everybody. So they're definitely making forward progress on that. And I would encourage anybody, especially if you're a veteran, you are getting out, you thinking you're going to get out, or you've already got out, I would highly encourage you to, if you're intimidated by the horror stories that you heard of the VA, I am one of those living, breathing examples that they have really made it better, and I would highly, highly encourage you to pursue it, especially now, and more importantly, especially if you're a veteran that's gotten out within a year, because there's certain different things that you can be privy to.
Yep, absolutely.
Mhm.
And so. And we kind of really got into the weeds on this, but
Sure.
it's not necessarily. I know it's like we didn't shy away from anything, did we? We just jumped in feet first on this one.
Yeah, I'm all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. But and the thing is that employers shouldn't be. I know a lot of people want to do great things for veterans because of what they have done for our country,
Mhm.
and that's fantastic. But I think what some people may wind up doing is starting to, how do I want to say it, kind of put a persona or put, how do I want to say it? When you regard somebody as being a certain way. So
Sure.
like some of these like personality tests, right? So if you look at DISC, right?
Yeah,
DISC is, you're familiar with DISC, right?
Yeah.
So you can be a high D or a high I, or a combination of a somewhat high S and a low C or whatever, right? So everybody starts, or even better, at Myers-Briggs. You ask somebody, have you done a Myers-Briggs? Oh yeah, I'm an INTJ, and then they label themselves. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
And so there's this perception that although it's good to learn about those things, it's not good to sit there and classify yourself as something or not. And
Absolutely.
I think sometimes what happens is that when people are talking about a veteran, the first thing that goes through their mind is, okay, is he going to PTSD his way through my company or what? You know what I mean? And I think people need to be very careful about that for a couple of reasons. Number one, they don't know what the person's background is, but even second, and this is something that you probably don't know about, but from an American with Disabilities standpoint, if you regard as somebody as having a disability, they're actually like legally protected from discriminatory action. So you want to be careful about that, but you just go back to the human factor of it, is that you can't say to everybody that served in the military, whether it be Navy, Marines, Army, whatever, you can't sit there and automatically assume that just because they've had a full career or a partial career like yourself, that they're broken.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you definitely can't assume anything about anyone regardless of what they've done. That's one of the biggest things that I've ever learned in my life, is never to assume something about anyone. And I don't care if you're a veteran or not. You have no freaking clue what people are going through.
Right.
And when someone is a veteran, like you said, regardless of what branch you're coming from, regardless of their experiences, like two people can experience the same explosion, the same firefight, the same trauma on a ship, on a base. Like I said, I don't care what branch you're in, and have the completely different traumatic results because of that, right? So we experience everything differently. So there is just no way that you can look at somebody and say, well, they've done this or they've done that, and so they probably are like this or are not like that.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's like looking at a picture on a dating profile and say, "Oh, that
Yeah,
person looks nice," and then
that's
you
the
find out
one.
they're like the spawn of Satan.
Yeah, yeah, that's really unfortunate for people that do that, but I guess that's part of the fun.
It's part of the experience, I'm sure. But yeah, so you know, you now you got out and
Mhm,
then you actually relocated to
I did.
another part of the country, not far, but a different part of the
Uh-huh.
country. But can you kind of go through like what and you're employed as well as
Yes.
podcasting, and
Oh yeah.
how many times do you broadcast your podcast? What, 4 times a week? Is
Yeah,
that what you told?
yeah, not to get too far off track, but I started with one a week for the first year, and then I got super antsy, and I went to two, and then I quickly went to four, and I'm pretty sure I'm done with 4 a week.
Yeah, I don't. I have two, so I can imagine. But anyway, not to get sidetracked here,
Sure.
um, but can you kind of walk through or share with some folks what some of the experiences that you
Hmm.
had during your job
Hmm.
search? What were
Hmm.
kind of your thoughts? The things that you focused on or didn't focus on. Can you help people understand what you experienced when you got out of an environment where you were comfortable and you knew what to expect into the world where all of a sudden you went, oh my gosh, what did
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
do?
I'm more than happy to talk about that.
Yeah.
So I think I'm kind of an anomaly because I got out in 2018, and in December, I remember specifically in December of 2015 is when I knew I wanted to get out, and I started studying for the single job. Yes, I had my sights set on one job from the very beginning. So essentially 2.5 years, I set my sights on one job. I didn't even look anywhere else. I told you I don't leave anything to chance, and I know that might sound like I put a single point of failure on this, but I put the cards so much stacked in my favor, and I knew I just did so much overwhelming amount of research on the one position that I wanted to do. It's in information technician. Like I do more IT stuff now, and I studied all this time. I was just so ready. So I think typically people are really nervous about transitioning out, and I just did my dang best to be able to mitigate as much of that emotion as possible. So by the time, I guess, let's see, I'm trying to do the math. I think it was like 6 months before I even got out my EAOS. So my last official day in the Navy, I had a job. Like that is very
Yeah,
rare. I don't
it
typically
is.
hear about that. Usually, some people, because I talk to a lot of other people that are getting out at the same time as me, and they wouldn't even be able to get an interview until a month out, which to me, that's way too close. So I strategically looked for companies that were willing to hire early. I spoke with those recruiters. I spoke with people that I knew already worked there. So going back to
Mhm.
my time in Naval Special Warfare, that's a very special breed of people. They literally recruit for that specific area, and there's a very special type of person, like a mentality that goes there. So I knew that if I enjoyed working at a place like this and I enjoyed working with these certain people, that if those people left the military and went to work at another company, I could kind of use that to vet that company. So
Mm,
to me, that was really important. Just like you have to imagine, like if you don't know anything about me, but you know my best friend really, really well, and you trust my best friend, and which is your friend as well, and then you don't know me, but we meet, then you have a certain level of trust for me already because you have that
right.
trust in this person.
Yeah.
So I looked like, and the reason I give this whole example and dive deep into it, because I think it's really important when you're searching for a new job. And again, regardless of like coming out of the military or not, but if you know people in that, yeah, and just like start wide, right? So do you know people in that field or like career? Okay, now let's like slim it down a little bit more. Do you know people in that company, or do you know people on that team, or whatever, right? So you slim
Mhm.
it down as much as you can, and you do as much of your due diligence as you possibly can. And it ended up, I knew two people that worked at this company, which I very much trusted and I very much enjoyed working with before. I knew they were hard workers. So when they had been there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I knew that it was pretty safe to say that if they stayed there for that long, that I would more than likely enjoy it, be challenged, and also enjoy who I was working with as well, because that's a huge thing coming out of the military in particular is you're working with a certain type of people, and
Yep.
it can be intimidating. Like one of your questions was like, well, walk us through how it was when you first got out. And at first I was okay, and my wife thought I was crazy. She's like, when is he gonna blow up? Nothing's changed. He's like nothing happened, like I was totally sane. I was like going about my day. I didn't even talk about it. I was like in the military one day after 9 years, and then I wasn't in the military. And then it hit when I went to my first day at my job. I was still fine, and then I was walking around in civilian clothes, and I was looking at just people dressed however they wanted for the most part, in comparison to what I was used to.
Sure.
And I was just trying to figure out, what the heck did I do? And I say that it had such an impact. And if you remember, I said 2.5 years I prepared. 2.5 years I asked myself, is this what I really want? And I should say that I really much enjoyed my time in the Navy. Like I really did. One of the hardest decisions of my life was to get out of the military. But for me, I want to get out. I have a 6-month-old tomorrow. She'll be 6 months tomorrow. Yeah. And I wanted to be around for the family. So as much as I loved going to work in the military, like I literally love deploying and going out and doing the mission out forward in a different country. But I also want to see my girl take her first steps and things like that. So it was really difficult. And I think all of these emotions and this 2 years of preparation and having a job for 6 months before I got out, and I was so thankful for that. And all these emotions swirled up, and my train was going 100 miles per hour. And I got to my first day at work, and the train got derailed and it crashed. And I was like, holy crap.
What did I just do?
What's going on? And I came home and I was like, my wife's name is Jordan. And I was like, Jordan, I don't know how I'm feeling right now. I just had all these emotions that I probably should have felt a little bit more just come out. And I don't think necessarily that I was bottling them up. I just think I'm the type of guy that when I don't really truly embrace and get the full gravity of a situation until I'm finally experiencing it. Like I'm the guy that doesn't get excited for a trip until like he lands on the desert island somewhere and
you're on the airplane.
has a beer in my hand, or something. So I think that's what happened. So I would just encourage anybody, like no matter how much you prepare, because I feel like I prepared a lot more than probably the average person, you can still have this real sense of uncomfortability in an alien-like planet almost. And you just have to know and think about all the reasons why you made the decisions that you did.
Right.
And you did all your due diligence, like we talked about. You did all your vetting. And ultimately, like people talk about your why, and your why is so important. Like I brought up my family, and that's very near and dear to my heart. I've wanted a family for so long, and I had one, and I didn't want to lose that, and I wanted to be there for all those moments. So when I thought back to that, it was very simple. And on day 2, I was good to go. But day 1 was very tough.
So I'm going to apologize in advance. I have, in the beginning of the show, I always introduce that I've got Lola and Champ. Lola's my veteran comfort dog that she likes to hang around, and she tends to bring guys, out of the rafters if they start getting a little nervous when they come over here to work. Not that coming here to my house is something to get nervous about, but she just kind of tends to do that. And you know what it's like, because, a lot of guys are in the red, and she just tends to bring them down into the green just by being around. And then her lovable companion is Champ the Wonder Dog, who is speaking up right now because he lays, there's too much information. He lays on the air conditioning vent on the floor, and he either protests that it's not cold enough or that it's not on. So he's letting me know that so he's not happy. So shut the door.
I've got a golden retriever, and I swear she just does so much to make me feel better. I don't claim her as a helping dog like that, but she absolutely does that for me.
There's just something about pets, but that actually, we're going to have that conversation with another Navy veteran talking about the dogs, and look, if you have to bring somebody on board that has a comfort pet or a legitimate one, we're going to talk about that another time. So I don't want to steal that thunder, but so I love how you're talking about the reality hits you. Mm-hmm. And that's a very personal experience to go through. Mm-hmm. It's not. I mean, the years that I have been recruiting and talking to veterans about various positions, people that, I've talked to that are going through what you went through, that have not gone through a transition program outside of TAPS. Um,
Yeah,
they,
I did do something similar. I failed
yeah,
to mention that.
but it's, when I talk to them and I'll start saying like, so what is it that you're looking for? And they're like, I have no idea. And they just haven't taken the steps, or they haven't had the time to process emotionally and mentally what it is they're preparing to get into in the next stage of their life. And you're fortunate, but you still do the same thing that everybody does in a transition like that, is you hit that wall like, no, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? And even when I've taken a new job, I've done that too. I start doing something and then I'm like, what the hell did I just do? And if
Yeah.
you don't go through that, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care who you are. If you don't go through that in life, then you've got some sort of you got a blockage. I mean, if it doesn't, it should scare you a little bit, and it's perfectly
Yeah, I
fine
think so. I
to
think
get a
so.
little scared about it. So if you had now, so I don't want you to say anything negative about the company that you're working for, but what did you did you make your company aware of what it is that you were experiencing during change, or did they do anything to provide you any
the
type of
Sure,
transition?
sure. So the fortunate thing about where I work, that will remain nameless, but
Right.
I work for a larger IT company, and one of the most incredible things about that, if you remember, I said I had two friends that I worked with in NSW that went and worked with there. So I didn't end up working with them particularly, but I went to a team that was just full of veterans from all different services, and I think it's because, well, it's a few reasons. I'll leave them out of this podcast in particular, but one of the reasons is because I think those people just really, they want those challenges. They want to continue to be challenged, because one of the things that comes up a lot in my podcast is, at least, people are just like, what do I do? I don't know where to go now. I don't know. I don't know what to do. So I think, I don't know what the a percentage is, but there's got to be at least, like, I'm on a team of maybe 30 individuals, and there's maybe at least 10 veterans out of that. And there's, Navy, every branch. So I think to be able to have that connection there, one thing very real in the military is, if you've gone through similar things, you've gone through boot camp, you've been through it to some extent, there is some kind of connection, and connections are obviously really real with things and experiences that you've gone through with other people. So when other people that you have never seen before, they've gone through something, you can relate to them in some kind of capacity. And to me, that was really important. So to answer your question, the company didn't necessarily do anything in particular, but even my hiring manager was former Air Force, and we went behind closed doors, and I was like, man, I was really good until like just a little bit ago. And it's really weird. And he's like, yeah, it is weird, right? And he talked me through it, and he was really kind. And that's not to say that a non-veteran wouldn't be able to be like, hey, what's going on? There's obviously people out there from all over everywhere, but people that, like I said, have gone through what you've gone through to some extent have that more of an understanding, and it was more comforting, more importantly. So it was more comforting coming from somebody that had gone through that, and then having other people on my team that I could talk to. And then, like I said, it really, for me, it only lasted about a day. It was like this shell shock for one day, and I went on about it.
Little epiphany.
Yeah, because it got really real. I mean, it's not real until it happens, for me at least. And so, as I said, it's just nothing really in particular through the company. I'm sure there may be some programs out there, but I think just what's so encouraging is that to know that there are people out there that have experienced what you experience. And if you just ask for help, like, I could have kept it into myself and not told anybody at work, but I had faith, or I took a risk, or however you want to quantify it. Like, I talked to my hiring manager and I said, hey, this feels weird, and I just feel really out of place, and I don't feel comfortable. And it was just I think diving even deeper into it, one of the one of the reasons I was most uncomfortable is because I was in the military. I had rank. People could see like on my chest like what I had done to a certain point, ribbons and awards and things like this, things that I had just worked very hard for or had unfortunately had experienced, and they had been awarded to me. And people have certain understanding of what you've done because of that, and there's something that comes with that. And I'm not saying you are what your uniform is and what your uniform says and what's on your uniform. However, people understand that stuff when you're in the military. So when you're not stripped of it. I've made the decision to leave, but when you don't have that identity, I guess is what I'm saying anymore.
Right.
And nobody knows who you are. They're just like, hey, there's the new guy. They don't even maybe know I'm from the Navy or anything, and that I was in for nearly a decade. And so you lose a sense of identity, and that's one thing very difficult to struggle with. So I think you can do all the preparation you want to do, but when you lose that sense of identity, it can be very weird and difficult to deal with. And for me, and I would encourage other people's, but obviously we deal with things all very differently, but I would encourage other people to talk to somebody and open up, and hopefully somebody that you can relate to and help ease that transition. Because I felt, like I said, it was only a day. So after I had spoken with him, I was a lot better for the next day.
Yeah, well, that's good. So what would you recommend from your experience when people are talking to a potential veteran candidate? What are some things to keep in mind? Like, and there's another subject that I want to call out that I want you and I to get into, and that is it's probably more towards it may be more towards the veteran audience itself, but I think it's pertinent for the folks that are listening in now, the business owners and the business operators. But if they're interested in getting into hiring veterans specifically, what are some best practices? What are some recommendations that you would give them to keep in mind when talking to veterans who are looking for positions in companies?
Yeah, sure. So I would just start with, like, I think we had touched on it a little bit earlier somewhere. I'm trying to remember the context, but I think we were kind of saying, like, regardless of what people go through, we all experience things differently. So I think that kind of, at least in my mind, is similarly or coincides with when you're hiring somebody that's experienced something. So I haven't been a hiring manager before, so I'm not necessarily sure what they may or may not know. But if you do know that that person is a veteran, that I would just very much encourage, like, to. And I don't know if we're talking about, like, if we're treating people different ways or asking them different questions. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think we can all agree that nobody wants to be treated differently because of our background and assume anything. And I'm just trying to think back to all of the interviews that I did, because I had to do a bunch of them, and I don't feel as if anybody treated me differently or asked me different questions. I think this is the job that I wanted to go to. They knew that this was the job I wanted to go to because I was sitting there in front of them, and they asked me questions in particular to that job. Now, I will say that I didn't have all the qualifications for that job, and I got it. And I'll tell you how, because being in the military, like I said, we endure a lot of stressful situations, and somehow by PFM, and I'm not going to elaborate on that acronym, but on PFM, we make things work. And I was able to use many of those experiences to help get through my interviews, because a lot of the interview questions are experience based. Like, tell me about a time you did something like this or something like that. So I guess this helps for both hiring managers and people that are looking to be hired. I think it would be very beneficial, because maybe that person can't answer a certain technical question or one of the questions that you're trying to ask. However, if you can say, what have you done under certain situations, and tell me about a time when you did this, and really understand what makes this individual tick and how they react to these stressful situations and how they are able to flex and be able to pull an audible and shift left and right and do all these things real quick. I think that would be very helpful to understand what kind of individual have, do they have integrity? Are they coachable? Yes. I think these are very important things. So when you're able to say, tell me about a time when you did this, and this individual tells you what they did, and you can tell it's a no BS answer. It's actually something that they did, because I believe you can see that genuinely when somebody has lived through something and they tell it with such, passion, really,
Right.
about a situation. And regardless of how simple it is. So I think if you're vetting in that manner and you're allowing somebody to completely articulate themselves based on experience, on what they have done, not what they would do, then I think that would be for me, it was one of the most beneficial ways to be like, I know I'm not technically up to par for this job, but I know through all these other questions that I can show you, like those things I said, that I'm coachable, that I have integrity, that I'm willing to work hard, and then I'll do what it takes to get the job done. Because many times in the military, we don't have an option not to get the job done. So if you're asking questions, in that direction, then that guy or girl is going to more than likely be able to give you those answers. And if they don't, then maybe they're not the person for the job. But I think that gives encouragement to people, not, now on the reverse end, not just the hiring manager, but the individual that wants to go work for such a company that's hiring people like that. Oh gosh, I don't know if I have what it takes. I've been in the military for X amount of years, or maybe 20 years or 30 years, when that's all you knew was the military. And I don't know if I have the exact skills that they need, but I have a lot of leadership ability or experience. I have done all of these things, and I've done it in really tough situations, and I got it done with not a lot of money. I can guarantee you that. And I got it done with probably 30-year-old tools. And I am very coachable, and I can get it done. So I think I can see, if I was a hiring manager, that's the individual I want. I'm very huge on integrity and coachability.
Yeah.
And if I was somebody coming out of the military, if I knew those are the kind of questions coming towards me, that gives me a fighting chance where I can at least keep my head out of water, give them as many examples as I possibly can, and at least show them that I'm willing to work and I'm willing to bust my butt to be able to work for you. And that's what I can promise you. And these are examples of when I did that for the military and our nation.
Yeah. I think so the piece that I really wanted to kind of share with people, and I know you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about, is that, because I'm sure at some point you've kind of experienced it yourself in a way, is that, the military has very specific skill sets that not everybody is able to figure out when they're asked a question. How do I translate that into a way that a potential employer understands it?
Well, I would just say, first of all, you definitely, and this may seem obvious to a lot of people, but you don't want to be like military jargon, acronyms, all of those things. You want to at least, you want to do your research. I mean, if you truly are going to a civilian company that has no government affiliation, you got to do your due diligence on or talk to somebody that has never been in the military, that's your friend or family, and have them ask you some regular questions, or you kind of spout off some examples of when you've gotten certain jobs done under stressful times, or just on a tight deadline or something like that. And if you articulate yourself to this family member that's never been in the military, or this friend that's never been in the military, and everything makes sense, that's a good indicator. That's an easy way to do that, at least.
Yeah. And I think people need to understand that, when you're dealing with especially somebody who's a career, I mean, you're talking about 25, 30, 20 to anywhere between that 20 to 30 year mark, even the 10-year mark, that there's a certain level of institutionalization that takes place. And so if you're asking questions that are not able for them to successfully tell their story in a comfortable manner, you're not going to get a very good answer. And so what I mean by that is that, I'm on my 13th, coaching my 13th fellow now at the Honor Foundation. And the Honor Foundation is a transition program for anybody who's been in special ops and special forces in any branch of the military at this point. And it first started off, we were working with Navy SEALs. And so that's how I got involved in the community. And so, the first class, I would listen to people say, well, I had this interview and it went well, but, they were so tell me about yourself. And it's no, they don't do that, And they're like, I don't know what to tell them because the only thing I know about is bombs, bullets, and bodies, And
Mhm.
so, I was like, okay, so you can talk about
So, yeah.
your
I
steps in the career, like how you started when you
yeah.
went to, Buds and did your A school and all that stuff. I said, you can talk through those points, but eventually going to want to know what you bring to the table.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the thoughts that I had when you were saying that is I think it's very important to continue and maintain and work on your individuality while you're in the military, like have things that you do on the side. So I think if you get to a point where all you know, like you said, quote unquote, is like bullets, blood, and all of that stuff, then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe that was your life. But I just think it's very healthy to not just have one thing. And some people may argue that, and that's fine. I do believe in our individuality and our uniqueness, and I think that's what makes us human. And but I also believe in having, like I said, things that you do on the side. Like I work a day job, I have the podcast on the side. Even when I was in the military, I had the podcast on the side, and I spoke to people with outside the military. So I think if you get to a position where all you know is one thing, then that's unfortunate. I hope you will have done something on the side. However, if you do find yourself in that spot, then I think as long as you speak from the heart about what you have done and the experience of you've done, I'm very huge on it. I've said it many times. You need to be able to articulate what you've done in a manner for somebody else to be able to transcribe that, to understand that. So, like I said, I would encourage people to just maintain that individuality outside of the military and don't pigeonhole yourself to where
Right.
that's all you do. That's all you have to talk about, because you're not going to get that job. I'm sorry. Like, this isn't like some fluffy duffy, I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you always what you want to hear, not or what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, right? So I'm not going to tell you that, oh, it's really unfortunate that that's all you can talk about. I'm like, unfortunately, you might not get that job if that's all you know. Like I said, 2.5 years before I got out, I didn't know any of this. I needed to know Linux. I needed to know all these computer languages. I didn't know any of that. And so
Mm-hmm.
all I knew was military. You are absolutely right about that. But I knew I couldn't just do it only on my military experience. Yes, I knocked it out of the park because I was able to utilize those experiences, but
Right.
also had to deliver, technically speaking, as well, to show that, hey, I put in the work. If I'm going to tell an employer that I've been working on this for 2 years, I better have some technical aptitude to be able to show them, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think too is that, as employers are going through this and they start to hear exactly what you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
To the things that people who
Mm-hmm.
who are applying for these positions should avoid doing, but most importantly is I think employers have to bear in mind that if they start to hear that happening, because if anybody who's paying attention to this is going, yeah, I've seen this before, probably, and
Mm-hmm.
that they're thinking like, okay, so how do I get around this, right? Because we're all about finding solutions to challenges. So,
Absolutely.
I think what happens is that people have to figure out in their interview process, even though if you have a standardized interview process and it's not really more of the behavior-based interviewing, which is tell
Mm-hmm.
me about a
Sure.
time when you had
Sure.
more
Sure.
things
Sure.
to do than enough time to do it, right? And so therefore it tells their story. Then they need to take the question and alter it in a way that it opens a door for that person to be able to figure out how does my experience apply to what it is that you're doing? Because see, that's when an adult learns in the world, we don't learn just to take in knowledge and regurgitate it. It has to be applicable.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a paradigm shift. So the questions that are being asked, if you're not getting what you're looking out of somebody with a background like yours, or somebody who's in SOF, or is in the elite sections of the military, you're gonna need to be able to restructure your question. Ask the same question, just come at it from a different angle, so that way
Sure.
that person can say, okay, now I can apply my experience to this
Yeah.
because
So
it now
yeah,
makes
I
sense.
agree.
Because they struggle figuring out how to tell you how they did their job when their job was defending the nation and taking out the bad guy.
Yeah,
That
you're
that
absolutely
doesn't
right.
happen at Amazon's operations and logistics departments. you know, it doesn't work that way. So they're trying to figure out, okay, so I'm up against, I'm having an interview with Disney, or I'm having an interview with this company, and I have no idea how to explain this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like a part of good leadership, though, right? Because you can't treat. It's funny. We live in a world where everybody wants to be treated equally, and I absolutely believe in that. However, in a management position, or if you're a hiring manager, you have to talk to people differently, right? Because not everybody's
Yes.
gonna be really responsive to the same type of leadership, and that's again what makes us
Right.
unique, and we should embrace that. However, as a manager, you need to be able to recognize that. So even further, as a hiring manager with somebody you've never met before, then obviously you don't want to have these preconceived notions of what that person is or isn't, like we were talking about. But at the same time, you need to be able to, on the fly, be able to pull audibles, like maybe this person isn't responsive to these type of questions, but I do see some potential here. So maybe let me kind of shift where I'm coming from on the fly and be able to better lead in the moment. This person, it doesn't, just because the person doesn't work for you yet doesn't mean you can't show that type of thing, because at the same time you have to think like, this person's vetting you too. Do they really want to work for you? Right? So it's an interview really the both ways, because if I didn't enjoy the people that were interviewing me for the company I work at now, then they may have hired me or said they wanted me, but I would not have worked there. So I think it's really important to notice that it's not an interview isn't just one way.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it takes a little creativity to be able to talk to the various people that comes from
Yes.
a wide
Yes.
variety of backgrounds, but I love what you said earlier, and I wanted to share this hilarious story with you. Oh my gosh. I think that everybody in the audience is going to like this. So we had a guy that I have no doubt was in the Navy at one point in time.
Okay.
And I don't think he was in this community as he said he was. Imagine that, right? If you've
It
been
does
around
happen.
this community, I know, and you've been around the community long enough, you run into your share of posers, and he definitely was one of them. So he was always talking the lingo. He was, and it was getting, and he was doing it with other veterans, but then he started doing it with other people, and his personality was a little overwhelming, so he was somewhat of a little bit of a turnoff. We actually eventually wound up calling him Tall Tales. Yeah, it was pretty funny. Well, Tall Tales caught me and another guy who was in the Marine Corps. We were looking at something out in the back of the building, and he started telling this obnoxious story about how he was on the SEAL teams in Vietnam, and then he decided to go and become an F-4 fighter pilot in the course of a year, which I was thinking, like, how is that even possible? And I didn't even know anything at that time. I mean, this is like, 2003. And so his story was that he was doing a strafing run in Vietnam and took on small arms fire. And I'm thinking, how far off the deck are you moving at the speed of an F-4 to take small arms fire to where a bullet penetrates the cockpit and hits your leg? Because that's what he said. So he said he successfully somehow got out of his plane. I don't know. I kind of was just thinking through the other first part of it. Said that he was wheeled to the hospital. This is where you're really going to love this. They amputated both of his legs, put his legs inside a baby incubator next to his bed on life support, where when he
What?
woke up, he would watch his toes wiggle, and then they wheeled him into surgery and reattached him.
Holy smokes! No, I've never heard that. That's a first.
Did you not? Yeah.
Wow.
So I looked at him and I looked at the Marine. I'm like, I need to go. I got stuff I got to do. So about 6 months later, he leaves. And it was like that story did it for me. It's just
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of like I'm definitely going to put some distance here between the two of
Yeah,
us because I can't handle this.
I
And
believe you up till the Phantom Toes, and then I had enough.
so 6 months later, I'm talking to the location general manager and the regional vice president about this, and and they mentioned his name, and they said, yeah, he told the strangest story to us the other day. I'm like, oh dear God, did it have to do with an F-4? And they're like, no. And then we started comparing notes, and like, did he really say that? And I'm like, oh yeah, he was serious about it. So it's those guys too, and I say that story. It's funny, and I say it in jest, but I say it seriously too, because it's guys like that put veterans in a position to where like I said earlier in the show, people question whether or not veterans are going to PTSD themselves, in the workplace, or if they're going to have a breakdown, or they're going to, you know what I mean? And it's like guys like that give hardworking, honest veterans that are trying to get through life after experiencing what they've experienced, especially, in the fact that, we've been at war nearly for 18 years.
Yeah.
It gives it gives bad perception, and not every veteran's disabilities are visible. And so you've got tall tales here where people don't really quite know to whether they should believe him or not. And then you've got, John American over here who really is going through some problems.
Sure.
And, that makes things very complicated in the work, because the question at the end of the day is that you may not know anything about the military, but who do you really believe? Now, I'm sorry, if somebody tell you that they cut their legs off and then they stick them in a baby incubator and watch their toes wiggle and then have them reattached, clearly
That's wild. Yeah.
But some of the things that they may learn, they may not know exactly how to plug those in. And so, my recommendation for something like that is, reach out to an HR professional, or reach out to a professional, in a particular community who's well versed, or network amongst other military leaders that you may have met along the way, to talk about these things. Like, can you really help me understand what this person may be experiencing? And they'll do it. They'll work with you.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. So do you have anything else that you would like to share with anybody about the topics that we've been kind of talking about? Anything that you and I have kind of missed, because we've been doing this pretty unscripted tonight? No,
this is cool. I don't know how they usually go, but I've very much enjoyed this. I think it's been really cool that we've been able to jump around, and I think that's like the fun in it. It's not sometimes like life isn't straight, right? It's like life is so crazy and it bounces around. So let's like have some freaking fun with it, and let's talk about some serious stuff and some fun stuff too. But I've really loved the depth of our conversation, and I'm so appreciative of you having me on here. And it's very cool to experience, because I don't actually talk about a lot of this stuff on my podcast, and it's kind of like, I mean, we cover a lot of it, but some things on here that I haven't really thought of, and they were really good questions about like the whole, how you really, really dove into the hiring aspect of it, like from a hiring manager's perspective, and how we were able to talk about that. It was really enjoyable, and it made me think about it too on the fly, because some of those things I haven't thought about, and I just always, like I say so much on my podcast, but I think I feel so strongly about sharing one story with the intention of helping somebody else. And it was so awkward for me to talk about it at first, and just very weird to be on the social medias and talk about these things. But it's so important to share that, because of course there's somebody else that's going, I guarantee you, and maybe even somebody that listens to this podcast, but there's somebody out there that started preparing for transition 2.5 years before they got out. They were mentally fine all the way until the day that they got out. And the first day at a job, that they kind of went crazy for a whole 24 hours, and then they calmed down. And now they're like, I am still kind of trying to figure it out myself. So that's my life. I'm living that. And I guarantee you there's somebody else there's like that. So you're never going to be able to capture that person, or meet that person, or find out, or just know that somebody else is, just knowing that somebody else is experiencing what you're experiencing is just relieving in its own self. And so I'm very appreciative that you got me on here to be able to talk about, like, I always talk about other people on my podcast, so it's kind of cool to share a little bit more about me.
Well, that's good. Well, I really appreciate it. So Chris and I are doing a podcast swap. So right. He's going to be interviewing me soon. Yes. So I'll keep you guys posted as to when that's going to happen, because this conversation isn't over with, which is really awesome. Right. So our episode together on his show is, I'm not going to tell you, you're just going to have to show up and listen. So, but if people want to, I know I'm evil, right? So if people want to hear what your show is about, how can people find you? How can people find your show? How can they reach out and contact you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let them have it.
So there's a few different ways. I'm on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, and the best way to find me on that is Kristof Lewis, KristofLewis. and I'm pretty active on there. I post every single day, and I just have a lot of fun. I have my website, kristoflewis.com. You can find all of the podcast stuff there, and of course, the podcast is on any major podcast app, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, all of those things, Podbean for Android, all of those things, you can find it. So Instagram, website, and any place where you find a podcast is where I will be.
Well, thank you so much again for joining me. This has been absolutely fantastic, and I think people are really going to appreciate what you brought to the table as far as helping other veterans land positions in their companies.
Yeah, I really do hope so. Thanks so much.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that segment. Today I want to do a spotlight real quick on one of our affiliates, Legal Resources. Legal Resources is a really awesome benefit that you can actually provide for your employees. You can work to either have it being an employee or an employer provided benefit, and it allows your employees the opportunity to go ahead and seek out legal advice under a particular plan with certain types of pricing available and discounts, specifically for things like trust planning, drafting a will, and other, specific legal requirements. And you guys can check out Legal Resources by clicking on over to bestpractices.org, the website. Click on the affiliates link, scroll down till you see Legal Resources, and link on over. And if you want a formal introduction, by all means, reach out to me and I'll be happy to go ahead and help you guys shake some hands. We've got workshops coming up in October, November, and December. This is a great opportunity to get set up for these. Hiring for talent for employers and workshop. We've got a couple opportunities in October coming up. We've also got in November kicking off a successful New Year. And we also have in December helping grieving employees through the holidays. That's going to be a pretty strong workshop because just about every employer has at least one or a small handful of those individuals. So you can register for these events today at bestpractices.org by clicking on the events link, and then just click right on over into each segment and you'll be able to go ahead and register for the event. Now, we have new courses that are coming out. They're not quite ready yet for release, but on the HR University by Best Practices, currently we have Understanding Generation Z, which is the newest course that was released. We have Hiring Talent for Employers, and then we also have an overview of the American Disabilities Act for employers. Now, when we release a new course, there is a 5 for 50 special, which basically means that it's 50% off for the first 5 days after the course is released. The new course discount will expire, but you are able to take advantage of the special offering by clicking on the HR University at the top of the bestpractices.org website and logging in and taking the much needed information. So what's going to be coming down is that we're going to be releasing individual courses, and then we're also going to be releasing boot camp bundles as well. We're focusing in on general HR compliance in 3 different segments, and then we're also doing government contracting as well. So that's going to be a different boot camp segment, but we're going to keep you tuned in when those things are coming up. And then also 2 books that are available for you guys. The Holy Cow, I Have to Complete an I-9 book, and then Holy Cow, I Have to Talk to My Boss. You guys can also go ahead and purchase those books both online at the website, or you can jump onto Amazon and grab them over there as well. So email me your HR questions. This is pretty awesome stuff. I love answering these questions. I get really good ones. But you can go ahead, jump on the website, click on the podcast link from the menu, and down towards the bottom of the podcast is a submission form for you to actually post your question, which I may read and answer on an upcoming episode. Not to mention, when you sign up for Best Practices and have those things delivered to your inbox, those best practices, you get a little free gift from me as well. Now, you guys can follow me and find out what is going on in my world on a couple different places. So you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook at Best Practices in HR. You can also find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, Brenda Neckvattle. And again, my name is spelled N-E-C-K, like the thing you want to choke, V as in Victor, A-T-A-L. And once again, you can go ahead and find more information on the bestpractices.org website. Jump on the mailing list, and you are going to get the latest and greatest of best practices right into your inbox. And I really want to, again, thank you guys for taking the time to join me today. This has been yet another fantastic episode. You guys have a great one, and I will talk to you next time. Take care.